Recording. And recording. Okay. Okay, so I'm here with Beth Shed. What's the name of your Instagram?
Well, Wellesley Wednesdays is what I've been doing this for the last 100 days, but Beth Shed is my Instagram name.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so we're doing something kind of unusual today, where we're going to interview each other at the same time. We're going to take turns. Beth is going to do. I was going to do a story on Beth. She just wanted to do a story on you. So there you go. Right. Am I the 100th or?
No, you will be 101.
That's still a good number.
Yeah, that's good. That means it's continuing.
There you go. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will be glad of that.
Yeah.
And it got very windy all of a sudden.
That's good. That's karma.
Well, I don't know if it's great for the microphones, but we'll see. Okay, so I will start off. Beth, what is your first artistic memory?
Ooh. Okay. Golly, that's a good question. I think it would be embroidering doll clothes with my mother when I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
Probably I was 5 years old, maybe. I also remember having an enormous box of crayons with all 64 colors.
I remember those.
And that occasionally our Cocker Spaniel would get into them and take gold or silver, and so we didn't have those complementary colors for kings and queens. But that coloring and colored pencils were big to me.
Would the dog actually eat it?
Yes, she would eat them. Yep, paper and all. We always knew which color. But, but yeah, coloring was always big to me. I haven't thought about that in years. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hey, do they still make those crayons?
Oh, yes, they do, in the same box of 64 with a little sharpener on the back.
Very good,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
All right, your turn.
Okay, so I want to know how you started doing videography and working for Wellesley Media, but really what was the beginning of all of that interest in the interview process and in capturing people in good lighting and all of that?
Well, that's a big question. I grew up in filmmaking. My parents, my mother was a painter at one time. My father was a poet. They ran an art gallery in Provincetown. I grew up around filmmaking and art, and my mother was the first person to teach animation to children in the country. So I got a very early start in filmmaking. I worked on. I was like 5 or 6 years old when I first worked on a movie, animated.
Was it animation like you see Disney do with like
No,
page?
This is not cells. This is cutout animation.
Like Pokey and Gumby?
That's clay animation, which I also did. Every year she would change up what we did in the classes, and of course I was always there. And I suppose the high point of that was when I was around 8 years old. You remember the Mike Douglas show?
Absolutely.
I was on the Mike Douglas show with my mother.
I bet we saw you. Oh my God, really? Is that available now? Could we watch that on YouTube?
No, I've never tried on YouTube. I have a photograph of it. Where my mother and I are standing there with Mike Douglas and Rosemary Clooney. I will send that to you.
Rosemary Clooney.
You remember Rosemary Clooney?
Oh my gosh. Sisters, yeah. Oh my golly, that makes me very happy.
So actually, moving on, the reason I went to college for film and video production, I got to go for free because at that time my mother was head of the film department.
Oh, these were wonderful connections. Where was this?
Rhode Island School of Design, which is a very good school.
Yes, I do know that from friends. So did she teach animation, or what did she teach?
She did. She started off teaching beginning animation, and then, as she put it, she became head of the film department because none of the other teachers wanted to do the job. But also, the year I went there, my son was born.
So wait, so you take the RISD graduate, boom, move out,
yeah,
then what?
Well, I got a job at Community Access Television, which turned out to be a fun place to work, in Marshfield, Mass. And at the time, I would call myself a very shy person. So I realized that's not going to get me anywhere in life. So I decided I would get out of my shyness by interviewing people, because I'm curious. So that's what happened, and I realized it worked because when several years later I described myself as shy to one of my friends, they said, "Paul, you're not shy."
That's That is amazing.
So if you work on these things slowly, you can get a lot done.
Yes, that's right. And you change those habits day by day, by interview by interview.
Right, right.
That's so interesting because I was a shy person. In fact, in second grade, early memory, I was put in the corner because I was so antisocial. And so my mother thought that was a completely dysfunctional teaching method, but anyway, I ended up in the corner. And then I became more social during the year, as second graders can be. You're only 7. Mm-hmm. So then I got put back in the corner because I was too social. But what I found is that my shyness was mediated by also getting to know people and to always sort of act as the one asking the questions. And for me, I got a career in sales then, which I absolutely love because I was always asking questions and learning about problems and doing problem solving. And what I was selling was blood analyzers to hospitals, but for me it was problem solving.
So what made you get serious about the camera?
Well, so I had always had a camera. I remember having a little Kodak camera with a flash bulb on it, and that was just like a miracle. And there were pictures that I took when we'd go camping, and I always took the pictures at family get-togethers of my cousins and our dogs and our playhouse, and I was the chronicler. My parents were, my dad was very interested in film photography. He had a good Canon camera that he got in Japan. He worked with NCR at the time and was always over there. My mom was not interested in chronicling things, so it was fine for me to do it, you know. But anyway, so I was given a really good camera. My husband gave it to me in 2007. And I kept it on, it was a Nikon, and he went to, I don't know if it was Hunt's camera or whoever was at the mall. And I kept it on manual mode for 5 years. I mean on automatic mode, auto mode for 5 years. And it was taking really good pictures. High pixel count, it was great, but I was missing something and it didn't feel quite like art. Sometimes it looked like art, but sometimes it just looked like a photo. So I started taking classes. And one time I got into a class at Newton Continuing Ed, and it was a juried kind of thing where we as the class weighed in on what we saw in each other's photos. And I realized that there was a lot I could learn about composition, about lighting, about post-production, about all of those things that I'd never pondered. And so I got off of auto mode, went into aperture mode, and then shutter mode, you know, all these other things, and finally went full manual, I guess 7 years ago, and it changed my photography. But making a business out of it was inspired by demand. Somebody asked me if I could take pictures of some of the high school seniors who were on the football team who didn't have time to go to take them at the high school. And I did some in my backyard, and they were great, and people liked them, and so their friends said it, and their friends said it, and it just moved from what was like Beth Shed graphics to Beth Shed photography. I remember the Council on Aging, probably the first time I met you at those events. I did a lot of their beginning events because a friend of mine was involved in the Friends of the Council on Aging, and I got to know people and I got to know organizations, and one thing led to another, and I did more events, and I did some weddings, and then I did birthday parties and graduations and reunions, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you got into weddings at all, because I do a lot of weddings.
Well, as I have found, weddings, I have 3 criteria for doing a wedding. It has to be somebody I know, already care for, outside preferred, because I'm a nature buff, and low ego bride. So, because at 61, I found it's demanding to be on site for 10 hours, following the whole process through, and I don't want to hire a second shooter to assist with me. So I've done 5 weddings, and they've all been either outdoors or all good friends, and some of them inside, but that criteria.
Yeah. So I do a lot of weddings too, mostly video, but I tell people weddings are harder than anything else I do.
They are nonstop. It is fast and furious, and you're responsible for every single memory archive, which is a huge deal.
You have to be at full attention all the time.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have a question for you. So being that I started this 100 Days Wellesley Home Days series, what I've been trying to noodle out from the people that I'm talking to is, how did the whole COVID era work for you? And I know it's a big question, but what were the good things that you saw come from it personally? You can mention the challenges, because I know we've all had challenges, but also, has it changed you in some way?
Well, it made me rethink what I was doing, because besides shooting video, I write screenplays and stuff too, and I belong to a group called the Harvard Square Scriptwriters. We meet once a week, we're meeting on Zoom now, and we share our screenplays and critique each other's work. And but I've never made a feature film of my own. I've worked on other people's films, but never my own. And I had a TV series idea, which I'd actually written 6 episodes of, which is a lot of work. But I realized probably nothing's ever going to happen with this unless I turn it into a podcast. And you know, since I was a kid, I've loved radio plays. My junior high school had a huge collection of cassettes of old radio plays like Suspense and Sorry, Wrong Number, stuff like that. A lot of great stuff, which shows you the power you can do with just your ears, and which is funny because I'm a very visual person, of course.
Yeah.
But
Tune in different when you're
yeah. So I actually rewrote some of my scripts for audio, and it's kind of fun. And you know, I love to edit video, and editing audio is a similar kind of thrill to it. And of course, there's a lot of like big sci-fi podcasts now, because you can do anything on audio, which things would cost $1 million for if you're shooting live film, which you can do for 50 cents with audio. So there's a lot of temptation to just go wild, and I've given into that temptation. Yeah, right.
Slamming doors and falling things out of closets and all that, yeah. You know, was that because you had the time during COVID? Yeah, because Wellesley Media was slow then, right?
They said, Paul, stay home.
Okay, so you were, okay.
Yeah. And I did. But fortunately, I was able to use the time in a valuable manner. So. Is
there anything launched that we can see yet?
Not yet, no. I want to finish the first 6 episodes. I'm just finishing the 3rd episode right now.
What's the genre?
I call it a surrealistic romantic comedy.
A surrealistic, what is it?
Romantic comedy.
Oh, good. Aren't they all?
Well, yes, I suppose so, yeah. If they're not romantic tragedy, yeah. And of course, there's always a little bit of both, so.
So, did the Zoom collaboration work for you as well? Was that?
Yeah, I really, it's so much easier than driving into Harvard Square to find parking, and then I miss actually meeting people in person. And in the old days, we used to, after we had our meetings, we would go get a drink.
Oh, yeah.
If whoever was being criticized that day, we'd get a free drink, because they would need one.
Hot seat day. So you bring your drink to the computer when you do this now?
You could. Yeah. I mean,
there have been a lot of mysterious coffee cups being used at 9 o'clock at night. I know that.
So.
Oh, that's really interesting.
That's my long story there.
Okay, so that's really okay. So then, what will happen for the rest of the summer? Will you continue to work on it?
I'm still working on it in my spare time, but I'm enjoying getting back and shooting stuff, and it's always a challenge in the summer, because during the school year there's tons of stuff going on between Wellesley High School and Wellesley College, which I shoot a lot of stuff with them, and even the grade schools and stuff. And but during the summer, all that stuff tapers off quite a bit, and during the continued quarantine, it's still tapered up, so it's still hard to get shoots sometimes, which is why I'm doing something so unusual with you.
Lucky me. All right. Well, you know, okay, so I was wondering, like, so what's the process? Let's say, so you're working at all these area schools. They come to Wellesley Media. Are you the guy? It's just you?
No.
How many people are in the team?
There's a couple of people. James Joyce is my boss.
Oh, yeah.
He is the main person who runs things.
And does he do any workout at these events?
He shoots events occasionally. He's very involved with communicating with people from town government.
Okay. So
and
the selectman,
he's kind of like the universal troubleshooter too. Mm-hmm. He's really the person people end up going to if they have a problem. Rebecca, my friend Rebecca at the studio.
Okay. You don't call her Miss Rebecca something.
No, she's a great sports videographer.
Oh.
She shoots all the sports events. She's won awards for it. She's really, really good. We're very proud of her. I just can't remember her last name at the moment.
So you all have different specialties.
Yes,
yeah.
And we have Keegan. He's kind of like he's if you want to borrow equipment from the studio, you can do that. So if you just borrow a video camera for an afternoon or
isn't that nice?
Or a
do you
weekend
guys
or
do that
something.
much with the high school, or who would be your borrower?
High school actually has their own very good studio.
Huh.
And something unusual about our TV studio is I worked at like 5 or 6 different studios, and I visited a whole bunch over the years. because I've been doing this like over 30 years, I guess. Is that our studio is pretty small for a big town like Wellesley, but we have mini studios all over town, like at the library, at the police station, at the senior center, and there's a couple more.
I mean, where you keep gear, right? So you.
We have real mini studios there. There are cameras hooked up in the walls. There's a little control room where you can switch between the cameras, because there's a great interest in what the town government is doing in this town.
Yeah.
And so we show a lot of town government stuff.
That's so great. That's how that happens. It's not you guys setting everything up for.
No, we don't.
You run it when
yeah,
you're there.
I mean, when I first started in community access TV, I did a lot of that. I would set up every time I shot a meeting, and not fun.
Yeah, I bet not. That's like grace under pressure.
Right. And I don't do any of that stuff now, or very rarely. I shoot like special town meeting occasionally. But for the most part, we have part-timers who come in just for the evenings to do that. A lot of them have video day jobs, but they come in at night and they do stuff for Wellesley TV.
Oh, that's great.
Wellesley Media, I should say.
Great.
Yeah. So let me ask you, okay, so how did you come up with you really centered on Wellesley here?
Yeah. Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, so 2 years ago, how long ago was it? Longer than that, sadly, 3.5 years ago, when Trump was elected, there was so much animosity and people were so afraid to talk to each other. And I just felt like there was this distance that was creeping in between people. Conversation that I grew up with at our dinner table with cousins and aunts and uncles and friends visiting, we did talk about politics. Not that I did, my parents did. And people were afraid to do that. And I just saw people sort of not separating physically, but almost separating conversationally from each other. Yeah. And so it was a week before New Year's, whatever that was, 2.5 years ago, and my husband and I were at a bar. We have so many good conversations sitting side by side. And I said, I want to do something with these photos. I was already posting something pretty much every day that was a beautiful photo and a quote, because I've always loved words. And I've always loved truth that comes in well assembled words, like a quote. So I thought, I got to do something more. And so I decided that one day a week I would do a thing called Wellesley Wednesdays, where I would systematically find the people that I had known, respected, been curious about, who were public figures, not public, whatever. Talk to them about what made them love to do what they did. And it was wildly successful. I did 65 of those. People loved it. I applied to fill the lobby with my pictures at the library, and they accepted it. And they gave me the Wakeland room too. And people poured over it for a month. It was like People Magazine for Wellesley. Yeah. And
that was a giant show. It's the biggest show I've ever seen there.
Well, it was I would say it blew me away, but it accomplished exactly what I wanted. I wanted people to slow down, look at people that they may or may not know, be curious, and learn a little something more, so that next time they see that person, they might stop and have a conversation. I mean, all I wanted to do was somehow forge a connection in even the smallest energetic way. But what I found from it too is I absolutely loved getting people's stories. So I did that for 65 days, and then my business has been incredibly busy, and so I didn't have time to dedicate to it every single week, finding somebody to photograph, writing the content, which is hard to take an interview that might happen for an hour and condense it into 340 words and make them all matter. So I sort of stopped doing it. Had my display last October, it was wonderful. The feedback I got was tremendous. It, warmed my heart. And so when COVID began, and we've lived here since '89, so I know a lot of people. I've been on PTO, I've been in Wellesley Service League, I've held signs, I've volunteered at the food pantry. My kids have babysat. We've worked at the local. We've been very involved, happy family here. So seeing people in Wellesley thrills me. And I'm from the Midwest, so I've always been unafraid to ask people who they are and what they like to do. So anyway, here comes COVID. And we had just returned from a quick vacation with our younger daughter. And I went over to see my parents at Phillips Park. And there was a St. Patrick's Day gathering where they were all going to stand on their patios and sing Irish Eyes Are Smiling. And so it was all these 70 to 90-year-old people on their patios. And I thought, wow, these are people that normally would be at the COA, at Roach Brothers, in the driveway, in the lobby, talking to each other, and the only way they can connect is this way. I took their picture. Deb Brown was there from Swellesley, and I said, I have my thing. It's going to be Wellesley Home Days. So that day, I took a picture of my parents. It was on St. Patrick's Day, and wrote my first episode, my first series, post in the series, and I loved it. And the next day, I took a photo from my daughter's upstairs window, or bedroom window, of our neighbors out on their patio. And then I got a little bolder the next day and got our neighbors across the street, but I was still 20 feet away with this, with this big lens, with a long lens, so people didn't feel scared. But then it started getting really serious. And I remember finding out that some of the merchants were closed, and then all of the merchants were closed. And so I went to Wasix to pick up something, and I took their picture. Anyway, flash forward, now it's 101 days, and every day I've photographed and written something, 340 words, about a family or a business or a nonprofit here in Wellesley who's doing something good. And so the reason I ask you, what's your, what good has come from it? I'm a recovering pessimist. I am an optimist, and I tend to think if you give things enough time, good happens. And time after time with these interviews I did with the families, there were good things happening in those homes. Now granted, none of us are food insecure. I didn't interview anybody who is at this point in dire straits, and so I realize that's a somewhat skewed view. But I wanted to find positive so I could share positive. My job was not to uncover deep, dark secrets and difficulties. That wasn't the angle I was going for. I wanted to give people hope and sort of an appreciation for the quiet that was happening throughout the village. And I found it time and again, people were enjoying sitting at the table, playing games. People liked having dad not travel. People liked, the kids helping with certain, anyway, it just was a layered, it was a gift I gave myself, actually, as it turns out. And I am a bit of a Pollyanna in many ways, and I realize that sometimes we have to be alive a very long time to see the positive come from a negative situation. Yeah. But and the feedback I've been getting by the viewers that I have read are that they look forward to it. And so for the foreseeable future, I'll continue doing it as long as it makes sense in my schedule, and as long as people are interested in participating in it. So, and I do hope to, my goal is, if the library would accept another display, I would like to display, but it will be, there'll be an added component. I'm going to go back to each of the families and ask them how they changed. So it takes another 1.5 years for me to get in there if they do approve me being there. And so people will have had another year to think about it and see what changed in their life.
Sure, that would be another very popular show.
Yeah, well, I think it's a story to tell for the ages. We've all changed in some way, so, and I have too.
We're still changing.
Oh yes, every day, every cell.